Good morning. Welcome for practice. I'm really glad to see you. And right now, what we're studying in the yoga psychology course is what we call the 6 stations of the mind. And so I'm going to organize this class to understand those 6 stations of the mind in an embodied sense. What are they? Why does it happen? And what can we do to come into our sort of calm center, the central place in us from where we can see those 6 stations, almost as if you were walking into the center of a room that had multiple doors. It's a round room. Let's say it's a yurt with 6 doors. And you go to the center of the yurt and you're able to look at each door or each station of the mind from a place that's like grounded and wise and is capable of equanimity and curiosity, and that knows we are not over-identified with those different stations of the mind. So that's kind of my aim for your practice this morning, and that, of course, you can feel that in an embodied sense. So let's start with a period of sitting quietly together. Please take your comfortable seat. You can rest your hands in your lap. You're welcome to close your eyes. And as you observe yourself arriving from wherever you just came, whatever the activity was, as you observe yourself arriving, you might ask, if you were in a yurt that had 6 doors, where are you standing? And invite yourself to find the center of that yurt. To help find the center of your seat, your physical seat, you can rock a little bit from one sitting bone to the other and towards the pubic bone and the tailbone, and just give a few moments of exploration where you could actually find out if you're sitting in your center or if you were a little bit tipped side to side or front to back. And when you sense the center for your seat, the pelvic floor will have a little bit of tone, and it ought to feel like the spine is growing up from that sense of tone. And then as you lengthen your spine up, lift also the crown of your skull and relax the outer form of your body, your eyebrows, the corners of your eyes. Soften the hinge of your jaw. Invite your shoulder blades to relax down your upper back. And then welcome the solar plexus to also be relaxed. The energy of the floating ribs will flow downwards, even though the heart is going upwards. And so too is the crown of your skull. And then let's begin to fill the inner world with the breath. So inhale from the base of your spine. Of course, the diaphragm is going to draw the breath down through the nose into the lungs. But just imagine that you're inhaling from the base of the spine, and the inhale breath is going up the front of the spine. The middle section of your breath, the ribs ought to expand laterally. And the upper portion of the breath, we do want to sense that the heart is rising. And so too are the upper ribs and your collarbone. When we exhale, let's begin from the base of the spine also, so even from the pelvic floor. And then that also moves up the front of the spine towards the area of your solar plexus. Make each part of the breath smooth. And of course, while you're practicing this, you're also likely noticing, what have you come into class with today? What physical, mental, emotional residue have you brought with you? Allow for that noticing, but don't be discouraged by any of it. In fact, you can be encouraged by the breath as a way to bring you to your internally resourced place. So make each part of the breath smooth. The inhale, the curve of the inhale down to the exhale, and the curve of the exhale back to the inhale. Now, even though the breath is moving, it's rising and falling, as we say, let's rest the mental focus at the place where the inhale begins and the place where the exhale ends. And so the mind won't depart that spot, even though the breath is moving. And perhaps if you've been following your breath with your mind, you're now going to condense your attention just to the pelvic floor. And to be more specific, let's imagine that the inhale begins kind of in the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor, and your exhale begins in the front hemisphere of the pelvic floor. This is to balance what most people have with pelvic floor tone. So keep your mind focused there, even as the inhale wanders upwards to fill the torso, and even as you sense the exhale toning the abdomen upwards towards the solar plexus. Keep your mind at rest at the pelvic floor. When you're watching the pelvic floor now, the inhale will apply a slight pressure downwards on the pelvic floor, and we want that to be resilient enough to feel the inhalation. The exhale is going to apply a slight tone, the pelvic floor kind of rising up. We want that to feel like it's a natural strength, not something that you're coercing or forcing. And at the end of your next exhale, relax this practice, which is a relatively specific practice, but relax from it. So the physical body, the breath body, they can both soften, and let yourself drop into the mind body, the manas, manomaya kosha. And notice if the animal part of that mind is more restful right now. Has this short practice in any way settled down the animal mind? And you might notice if the short practice also settled down your narrative mind, the part of you that tells the story about yourself or a story about others, or the part that tells stories about the past and the future. And then see if it's possible that you're more connected to or have more access to your awareness mind. And then please raise your hands to your heart. With your exhale, you may bow your head to your heart and release your hands, and please open your eyes. So there are three aspects of mind spoken through the lens of classical yoga. We have the manas, which is our animal mind. And we have the ahankara, also called the ego mind. And I'm referring to that as your narrative mind, the part of your mind that is telling you the story about yourself and that identifies with that story. And then we have the third part called the buddhi, which is our higher intelligence, sometimes referred to as the intellect, but I prefer the phrase higher intelligence. And I might refer to that today as your awareness mind. So the animal mind is heavily activated in the lizard brain and the limbic brain. And it prefers things like craving, grasping, the pursuit of something. The animal mind is like you see with your dogs and cats, that they're pursuing something or they're moving away from something, backing away, escaping from something. So the animal mind is very motivated by senses and by desire and aversion, craving and resistance, wanting and not wanting. Those are two of the stations of the mind that we live with. We also, just like our cats and dogs, we have a grasping mind and an aversion mind. And ours is more elegant, so we can build scaffolds around it and justify it to ourselves. But that comes from your lizard brain and your limbic brain. We also store memories, and we store sense impressions that give us this like memory catalog. Remember at the library when we were kids and you pulled out a drawer and had all those cards in there, the card catalog? You can imagine a massive card catalog and all these drawers that you could pull out. And when you pull one out, it's got memories of a certain part of your past. And so we can end up being preoccupied by our past, and our past has made impressions in the body and in the mind through which we might be looking as if we're looking through the lenses of the past to try to interpret the present moment. So, for example, if we once came upon a snake and we were terrified of the snake, we ran away from the snake. Maybe it was a gardener snake, so it wasn't even dangerous, but we didn't know. We just saw a snake and the mind was like, snake. I'm in the second grade. I heard snakes are poisonous. I'm running away from the snake. The next time that I come upon a rope in the dark in the garden, I might think it's a snake. And, this is a very famous question that we ask in meditation circles, like, is it a rope or is it a snake? Well, which question you're going to hang around for the answer? If it's a snake, you're going to get out of there. And if you think it's a snake, you're going to back away from it. There's going to be a flinch reaction. So because waiting to see if it's actually a rope is more dangerous than waiting to see if it's a snake. Because if it's a snake, it will get you while you're waiting to find out if it's a rope. And if it's a poisonous snake, that's dangerous. So in any case, that's based on a past impression that also picks up your survival brain and adds into the present moment an interpretation that you might not know is happening. Because the lenses that we're wearing, they're so personal to us. It's like the freckles on your arm. They're just there. So these lenses are just there, and we may not have had the chance to explore them in depth. Our past impressions also stimulate our future anticipations. Those are called relational anticipations. And so we can have this sense of, from the limbic brain where the past is stored, we can have this sense of apprehension or anticipation about, or even excitement of the future. And we can, in our minds, play a movie of what the future is going to be. And if it's pleasant or non-pleasant, we're having a reaction from the brain and from the body, and of course, from our heart and our emotions too. We can add to that our ability, and our cats and dogs don't have this ability. They are imprinted by their past, a past experience with a housemaid or a neighboring animal, and the dogs will have an imprint. My little handicapped dog, who many of you met at my studio years ago, he is, of course, since passed on, but we used to bike commute to the studio. So I was on my bicycle. He was in his dog cart behind the bicycle, a yellow covered wagon with some viewing windows. He could see out. He couldn't get out, but he could see out. And every time I rode my bicycle from this neighborhood, 5 houses down on the left, he had to bark at the driveway. He insisted on barking at that driveway. And on the way home, he insisted on barking at that driveway again, because at the end of that driveway were two big black labs. And he was a black lab mixed with a corgi, so like a shrunken little black lab. And those two dogs barked and he barked, and they had to do it every time we went by. So past impressions live in the animal mind. We also have this capacity to plan our future, or to think we're going to, we think we're planning our future. We think we're going to get that worked out. And we do have in the neocortex an ability to plan, to have context, perspective, to handle some logistics and some pragmatics. But the part of the mind that is worried about and perseverating about the future is not so much up in the neocortex as it is driven by the limbic brain, fear of the past repeating itself in the future. And so this conglomeration of things then gives us a sense of what are we, who am I, what is my identity? And we call that the self, inner self, capital little s, the internalized sense of like, who am I? The map of my personality, my likes and dislikes, my past, my future. And the way I'm kind of doing the configuration of all of that is my like small self, personal self, narrative self. And we also generate an idea about the other. And it's also narrative. So it's not like when we say other in this case, I'm not referring to the indwelling self of the other or the indwelling self of me. Those are capital S. When we look at other in this dynamic, past, future, likes and dislikes, self and other, we've already had, before the age of 3, we have impressions about other in relationship to us. And those impressions, unchallenged and updated, they kind of remain through our life spectrum. So other is sometimes we're seeing them through the lenses of our earliest experience of other. So we aren't seeing them clearly. And you know what? They're not seeing us clearly either, because they're doing it too. So it's very hard to be seen clearly by each other if we're just driven by the 6 stations of the mind, and therefore the lizard and limbic brain. So blessedly in yoga practice, we have solutions for this. We have tools we can use. And one of the primary tools is to use the body to re-regulate the whole system, to include not just the limbic and lizard brain, but the neocortex. So the whole brain gets to be here. We quiet down our fear center, our craving center, our aversion center. We come back into the body in the present moment. We're actually massaging the internal experience of the body. We're updating our perspectives. In many ways, you are sloughing off old perspectives and coming back into what is most deeply true, which is deeper than our personal narrative self. What is most deeply true about us takes us back to that inner self, capital S, where we then stand in the center of that yurt. And each of those doors is something we smile at. And we see the value of them from the perspective of the neocortex self. I ought to have some self-leadership, some self-care, some self-understanding. So other, this is my ally, my interdependent, interconnected family member, my companion. This is somebody, we are resources for each other. We're not competitors, we're collaborators. Past, I can learn from the past. I can understand how the past is foundational. Like everything I've learned in yoga for 25 or 30 years is with me in the now, but I'm not hung up on or grasping to the past. Future, I can see a horizon towards which I could move. Maybe I'm offering some solutions for human living, or I can see with foresight what's going to be needed to organize my day, because I'm leading a training today. So I have to have some foresight. That is a healthy aspect of future, coming from the neocortex. Dread is coming from the limbic brain, but foresight is coming from upstairs. With my likes and dislikes, I can sort of right-size those and see that I have certain preferences or values. I prefer to live by those. To the best of my ability, I will do that. And I have certain, in aversion, we might have certain clear boundaries, or I have an understanding of what my standards or my values are, where I will not veer to. So they kind of give you some riverbanks to move this prana through your life. So from the center of the yurt, you're looking out at these 6 stations, and each of them can be used as a tool, a wise way to facilitate your life, the rhythm of your day, and the ultimate journey of your life in yoga. To get there, to get to the center, is very helpful, even if you're going to then do some work, like I'm going to open up the door of my past and do some repair, recovery, inquiry. I'm going to gently close that door and come back to myself. I'm going to open up the door of my cravings and graspings. I'm going to get to know that. I'm going to close that and come back to myself. If we don't have a self from which to do the exploration, we can end up feeling very scattered out there, and our aversions might come up, preventing us from growing. And our fears and apprehensions may also prevent us from doing the research. So we're here to help the body, help the brain, to help the mind, and therefore the heart for this journey. So that's a summation, like the Cliff Notes version of the 6 stations of the mind. And I hope you identified with some of that, because it's all of us. Don't over-identify with the parts that I might have referred to that are a little bit more like shadow self, because it truly is all of us having this kind of experience. So with that in mind, we're going to use the tools of yoga, and I'm going to ask you from time to time to reflect on which aspect of the mind are you in? Are you in your animal mind? Are you in your narrative mind? Are you in your awareness mind? So if you need to, please shake out your legs. And when you're ready to, I'm going to ask you to sit without a blanket, but to sit on your sitting bones. Place your feet so they're hip distance apart, and put your hands out over your knees on the front side. Yeah. Now we're going to use ujjayii breathing, which I won't explain because I think all of you actually know it. But for those of you who don't know ujjayii breathing, it's worth learning it from a skilled teacher. And let's use a very subtle form of ujjayii breathing. So on the inhale, reach up, arch your spine, open your throat. On the exhale, curl down and around your spine. Hold onto your knees so you can broaden the back of your body. Inhale, roll forward on your sitting bones, come up through your heart. Exhale, curl down, and start the exhale from the pubic bone. Roll into your inhale at the sitting bones and the tailbone. Exhale, curl down, and again, round your spine. Inhale, roll forward and up. And exhale, roll down. And then rise up to your seat, and please cross your ankles. As you cross your ankles, you might sit on a blanket if you need one. Otherwise, just sit on the floor as I'm doing. Bring your left hand across to your right knee. Place your right hand behind you. And inhale, twist upwards. And exhale, rotate to your right. Inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, twist to your right. And then exhale around to center. Bring your right hand across to your left knee. Walk your left hand around behind you. Inhale, go up through the spine. And exhale, twist to your left. Inhale, lengthen. And exhale to rotate. And do that one more time. And then come around to face forward. Now we just did something really simple. Well, let's take notice. What is the effect? Do you find yourself dropping in more? If you close the eyes, what aspects of the mind are most present? So maybe you just have like a slight reduction in the noise of the 6 stations as if they were radio stations. Maybe you have a pretty clear reduction of that and you find yourself in the center of yourself. One of the key things in this kind of yoga is that when we're synchronizing the movement and the breath, we're using the neocortex and the lizard brain to calm down the limbic brain. So this synchronizing is not just to be fancy or to be closer to a certain tradition of yoga. It's really that when you're synchronizing, you have to be pacing, supporting, observing from your neocortex. The lizard brain can't count, but it is heavily motivated by rhythm. And you can create the rhythm that calms down your lizard brain, which is helping you with breathing. That's one of the jobs of the lizard brain. When that's occurring, the limbic brain is going to be kind of soothed. Like this is your amygdala. I'm holding your amygdala right and left. You're going to be end up. And exhale, roll down. And then rise up to your seat and please cross your ankles. As you cross your ankles, you might sit on a blanket if you need one. Otherwise, just sit on the floor as I'm doing. Bring your left hand across to your right knee. Place your right hand behind you and inhale, twist upwards and exhale, rotate to your right. Inhale, lengthen your spine. Exhale, twist to your right. And then exhale around to center. Bring your right hand across to your left knee. Walk your left hand around behind you. Inhale, go up through the spine. And exhale, twist to your left. Inhale, lengthen. And exhale to rotate. And do that one more time. And then come around to face forward. Now we just did something really simple. Well, let's take notice. What is the effect? Do you find yourself dropping in more? If you close the eyes, what aspects of the mind are most present? So maybe you just have like a slight reduction in the noise of the 6 stations as if they were radio stations. Maybe you have a pretty clear reduction of that and you find yourself in the center of yourself. One of the key things in this kind of yoga is that when we're synchronizing the movement and the breath, we're using the neocortex and the lizard brain to calm down the limbic brain. So this synchronizing is not just to be fancy or to be closer to a certain tradition of yoga. It's really that when you're synchronizing, you have to be pacing, supporting, observing from your neocortex. The lizard brain can't count, but it is heavily motivated by rhythm. And you can create the rhythm that calms down your lizard brain, which is helping you with breathing. That's one of the jobs of the lizard brain. When that's occurring, the limbic brain is going to be kind of soothed. Like this is your amygdala. I'm holding your amygdala right and left. You're going to be soothing the amygdala. Okay, so we're going to do a period of synchronizing right now. And I'd like to have you have 2 blocks on the long side of your yoga mat. Let me get my blocks. Place the 2 blocks for your hands. This is going to be for cat and cow pose. And we'll do it with the hands elevated because we're going to be moving back to a form of child's pose where I'll want your hands and arms to stay elevated on the blocks. We're going to be gliding forward to a form of seal pose, like a back bend pose. So let's start in quadruped and make a deliberate effort for a silky breath and a rhythmic experience. Let's inhale to cat pose. Exhale to cow pose. Inhale to cat pose. Exhale, reach back to child's pose using your cat pose spine. Inhale, roll forward to cat. Exhale, glide forward to cow pose. Inhale, roll your hips forward to seal pose. Exhale, press your hips back to cow pose. Keep the spine open on the front. Inhale to cat. Exhale, child's pose. Follow your inhale smoothly. Raise your spine into cat pose. Smoothly into cow pose. Allowing for the pauses in your breath cycle is worthwhile. I'm going to inhale, slide forward to seal. Exhale, cow pose. Inhale to cat. Start from the tailbone for the inhale. Exhale, child's pose. Start from the pubic bone for your exhale. Inhale, cat pose. Use the entire length of the breath for the movement. Exhale to cow pose. So this is very luxurious and patient. Inhale, slide forward to seal pose. And exhale to cow pose. Inhale to cat pose. And exhale, reach back towards child's pose. Let's stay in child's pose now. And please walk your hands forward on your blocks. Perhaps you'll hold the far end of the yoga block. Lift the base of your skull so your head is resting between your upper arms and not hanging lower than them. Draw your hips back towards your heels. And let's see if the inhale can start at the tailbone and expand the back hemisphere of your body. Expand the floating ribs on the back side, laterally, side to side. And even can the inhale find the back of the heart? And when you exhale, start from the pubic bone and ask if you can create an internal sense of tone up through your navel and past there to the solar plexus. You want to be using the ujjayii breath for both inhale and exhale. And that's one reason that we don't have the head dropping down towards the floor. You want your throat to be in position for the ujjayii sound to come smoothly. Okay, place your hands again as you would for normal child's pose. And as you inhale, roll up to cat. Exhale to cow pose. Inhale to seal pose. Now exhale, plank pose. Notice the tone of the lower belly in plank pose, and then inhale, lift your tailbone to go backwards to downward dog pose. Exhale, roll forward to plank pose. Inhale and lower your knees down, come into cow pose. And then exhale and reach your hips back towards your heels into child's pose. Inhale, cat. Exhale, cow. Inhale, seal pose. Exhale, plank pose. Inhale, downward facing dog. Exhale, roll your spine forward, plank pose. Inhale, cow pose. And exhale, child's pose. We're going to add to the sequence again. So inhale, cat pose. Cow pose. Okay, inhale and come into seal pose. And then exhale, bend your elbows, slide your shoulders back, and come down towards cobra pose. Inhale back up to seal pose. Exhale, plank. Inhale, downward facing dog. Okay, exhale, roll forward to plank. Inhale, cow pose. And exhale, child's pose. We'll do that same one again. Inhale, roll to cat pose. Synchronize with your own breath pace as you come to cow pose. Inhale to seal pose. Exhale, cobra pose. Inhale, seal pose. Exhale, plank. Inhale, downward dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. And exhale, plank. Inhale, cow pose. And exhale, child's pose. This time in child's pose, walk your hands back and place them near your feet. Relax the ujjayii breath. Invite your mind to also relax. Notice if you start narrating to yourself about yourself. Notice if when you drop the ujjayii or the synchronizing, if the mental noise comes back or does it stay at a distance? Every undulation of the spine here is also really helpful for your vagal tone. It's really helpful for so many things, but I want to mention that vagal tone there. So walk your hands back towards your knees. Okay, now we're going to add to the sequence from a different position. So step your right foot forward between your blocks, please. And if your left knee is not padded enough for you, then put more padding. This is a solid yoga mat, and underneath it is a soundproofing carpet because there's residents under this floor. I mean, people, not other kind of residents. So I have plenty of padding for my knee, and I want to make sure that you have that also. And then here for your foot, the heel is going to stay grounded, but the knee can come just as far as the toes if you like. Okay, so fingertips on the blocks, please. This is called Anjaneyasana, Asana, the way that you're in this pose right now. And I'm going to ask you to inhale into a cat pose spine. And then exhale into a cow pose spine. Inhale to a cat pose spine. And exhale to your cow pose spine. Now, a distinction here is that I'd like you to keep the pelvis stable. So it really is your spine that you're moving. Inhale to cat pose. You'll be gazing down towards the pubic bone, which is coming forward to gaze up at you. And then exhale to your cow pose spine. Keep your hips as they are, but lift your heart and open your throat. Now again, inhale to your cat pose spine. And once more, exhale to your cow pose spine. Without any sense of hanging in the right hip, inhale, raise both arms. And exhale, release down to the two blocks with your fingers. Now we're going to inhale, raise both hips and glide them backwards. So your right leg may straighten. And exhale to bow over your right leg. Inhale, raise up through your heart like a cow pose spine. Go ahead and look forward. And exhale to bow over your right leg, kind of like a cat pose spine. Inhale, glide forward. And exhale to bow over your right leg. Now, one more time, inhale and glide forward. And then exhale and come back down to your cow pose spine in Anjaneyasana. And inhale, raise your arms. And now let's exhale and descend with the intention to change sides. So we'll step backwards with the right knee and forward with the left foot. Allow your hips to come down towards your left heel, but without any sense that you're hanging in the left hip joint. With the inhale, come to your cat pose spine. And exhale to your cow pose spine. So inhale to cat pose. Your chin will come down towards your throat, gaze towards the pubic bone, which is gazing up at you. And then inhale, lift your heart, keep the pelvis stable. So you're not really moving the pelvis. We are moving the spine. So one more time, inhale to cat pose. And then exhale up to your cow pose spine. Lift your heart, lift your collarbones. And then inhale and raise both arms up. And exhale, arms wide to descend. Go ahead and touch the two blocks, curl your right toes under. And inhale, glide your hips back. And exhale to bow over your left leg. Inhale, glide forward. Notice how you're supporting the synchronizing and also the smoothness of the ujjayii breath. The rhythm that you are creating right now is a very important rhythm. We could talk about it as a healing rhythm because you're creating the rhythm that your nervous system can come to rely upon. It can trust you in daily life, not to be so easily, let's say, hijacked by the limbic brain or the lizard brain. Now, the next time that you inhale to go forward, go ahead and pause there. And we're going to exhale and come forward and down to Anjaneyasana. And then inhale, raise your arm. And exhale, release. And this time, let's step backwards to the downward dog pose. Breathe in. And then exhale, step one foot forward between your hands, step the second foot forward between your hands, come into Uttanasana. And then inhale, rise up. And exhale, come into mountain pose. Come into mountain pose. In mountain pose, you can relax your arm, drop your body weight into your heel and your toes. Relax the practice altogether. You're not now counting the breath or doing any ujjayii. Let it be really restful. And see if you might have access to your awareness mind. Perhaps the narrative mind and the animal mind are both a little bit quieter. And you're welcome to open your eyes for a moment if you'd like to. So I sometimes like to talk about the ujjayii breath as when you have the yogurt and you have the honey and you drizzle the honey on the yogurt. Ujjayii breathing is like you're mixing those two things together. So the two, the honey and the yogurt, become one. They're no longer each distinct from each other because you have blended them with the ujjayii breath. And so what this means is you have the physical body, and then you have this sweetness. It's actually called amrit, the nectar. So this is amrita yoga that we're practicing together. So amrit means the nectar. You have this sweetness of consciousness or the mind, or this beautiful chaperone that's more loving than your narrative self. So you're mixing those two things together using the ujjayii breath. And this becomes submerged in the yogurt, the body, and we remember that it's a unified self. Along the way, your narrative mind may be intruding on you or distracting you. That is going to happen, but stay with the process. Let's see where we go. Okay, so step back to the front of your yoga mat. And let's join the hands together in Anjali Mudra. Come into the ujjayii sound. And as you inhale, sweep your hands down, palms forward, raise up, lift your heart and look up. And then exhale, come down to Uttanasana. Inhale, glide your heart forward. Exhale, take the left toes back and use the entire exhale to arrive. Inhale, rise into your crescent. Exhale, descend really slowly or in no particular hurry. Inhale to downward dog pose. Exhale, left foot forward. Inhale, rise up. Follow your exhale slowly down, no particular hurry. Inhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Exhale, roll forward to plank. Turn the toes over and inhale to seal pose. Exhale to cobra pose. Inhale, seal. Plank pose. And inhale, Adho Mukha Svanasana. Exhale, one foot forward, second foot forward. Inhale to rise. And exhale to the heart. Continuing, inhale. And exhale, go slowly. So anytime you catch yourself rushing from your mind over your body, that awareness is a moment where you can slow yourself down. Let's take the right toes back. And moments of distraction are also moments of opportunity for awareness. You notice that you start becoming more coercive with the sound of the breath or like more demanding somehow. I'm going to recommend the opposite of that you get more subtle, not more demanding. Roll forward to plank. Come into seal pose. Remind yourself that this is a luxury. You are luxuriating in the opportunity. Cobra pose. Inhale up. Exhale, plank. It might help to remind yourself that there's not a competition, it's not a performance. Right foot forward. With your in-breath, rise at your own cadence. And exhale to descend also at the pace of your breath cycle. And step forward. Release over the legs. Inhale, rise up, upward hands pose. Exhale to mountain pose. So hands down to the heart and then arms alongside your torso. And again, stand really still. So in one little vignette, you might have had a lot to reflect on, little whispers from the narrative mind, but come promptly in to the quiet at the center of the animal or the narrative mind. Drop into the quiet that is neither the animal mind nor the narrative mind. You may have to listen for it like a little, like we say, horse whisper. You may have to listen for that quietude. If daily life has been quite noisy or your mind is habitually quite occupied, listen for the quiet that is not the narration and is not the animal mind. Take a wide stance, please. So this synchronizing is one way that we cause that to be possible. Another thing that we use in this form of yoga is an understanding of the vayus, or the 5 forms of prana. And what happens to those forms of prana when we are dysregulated, like when we have past unresolved memories, which that is very common, of course. Those past memories can kind of congeal in the mind-body energy field, and they trap our prana. It's held there. And then when we have healing, it's like prana gets released. Sometimes that is through tears, sometimes through grieving, and then there's this sense of space, of this relief that comes on the other side, and actually our life feels like unburdened and more expansive. So if the 5 forms of prana, if we know them and we can kind of work with them to elicit the organization of that prana to help us remember our inner self, then we can recognize when we're moving our prana out of balance. So let's take a wide stance here. From the top of the thighs, press back and fold forward, Prasarita Padottanasana. As you come down, place your fingertips on your blocks or on the floor. Now with the inhale, I'd like you to glide forward through your spine. Take the inner thighs back and the heart forward. And then exhale and bow deeply over your legs. Root the tailbone down, hug the outer heels in. Inhale, glide your heart forward, glide the inner thighs back. And exhale to bow towards your legs, tone the inner belly, and hug your outer heels towards each other. Inhale, glide forward again, and make the movements of the legs subtle. So it's not a big dramatic change between the inner thighs or the outer heels, but something that you can notice in a non-dramatic kind of subtle way. So inhale, come forward, take the inner thighs slightly back. Exhale to bow over the legs, bring the outer heels slightly in. Inhale, glide forward. Breathe into the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor. Move the inner thighs very slightly back. And exhale to bow towards your legs. Tone the front hemisphere of the pelvic floor, hug the outer heels slightly in. And then get quiet where you are. Allow the ujjayii breath to continue. And balance the actions of the legs from the upper inner thighs to the outer heel. And notice if it's possible for you to inhale into the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor and to exhale from the front hemisphere of the pelvic floor. And might you also be able to keep your mind connected to the pelvic floor and not wandering about your body? Can your thinking mind be there at the pelvic floor? Without judging, without scrutinizing, without evaluating. And then raise your hands up to your hips. And as you root down from your sitting bones towards your heels, rise up to standing. And let's go heel, toe, heel, toe, heel, toe. So that practice right there was for Apana Vayu, the base Vayu, the downward flowing Vayu. Just notice when you come up, if you might feel any bit more grounded. And please take a seat on a blanket. And when you take a seat, come into the pose called Baddha Konasana. It's bound angle pose. This is also a pose for Apana Vayu. And all 5 winds, all 5 pranas are there, but we're really focusing right now on Apana Vayu. Wait, yeah, I'll wait for you to get settled. You can have more than one blanket for sure. And you're going to sit up on the blanket, hopefully comfortably, not feeling like you're falling over backwards. And then put the soles of the feet together. Yeah. Okay, let's hold the big toes, or you can hold your ankles. And as you inhale, slide the pubic bone down and inhale to the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor as you roll up. And then exhale, curl the tailbone forward, snug the pubic bone up towards your belly button, gaze down. And then inhale, roll the inner thighs down, pubic bone down, lift up. And exhale, curl down, really noticing how the pelvic floor, the sitting bones, the tailbone, the pubic bone, how do they work together here? And inhale again, roll the inner thighs down. Even as you raise your heart up, think of the downward action of the inner thighs. And one more time, exhale, roll the tailbone forward. Try adding a little pressure from your outer heels against each other. And then come to sit in your Baddha Konasana. And see if you could get very still here, particularly for the mind. Let's keep the left leg in and take the right leg out. So most of us, we have a disconnection from Apana Vayu and an overemphasis on Prana Vayu, which is the all-encompassing Vayu that makes the mind feel like really bright, but also it becomes capable of escaping home. It's wandering about. But most of us have a deficit of this Apana Vayu, this felt sense of like being really grounded. And that can cause challenges at the pelvic floor. It can lead to things like anxiety or restlessness or feeling disconnected from the earth or disconnected from our tribe or our most important people. And those experiences can cause that pelvic floor to be hypervigilant or anxious. We also can have symptoms of things like constipation or difficulty with elimination of any kind. We might, in addition, feel that we're disconnected from Apana Vayu. We have a lot of mental anxiety. So Apana is the eliminatory Vayu. And just as it feels really good to clean your house and take out the garbage and the recycling, it feels really good to clean this house. And it lets the other Vayus come into balance. So in this position, left leg in, right leg out, I'd like you just to walk forward a little ways. Come down to maybe a 45-degree angle. And if you can't come as far forward as 45 degrees, of course, that's totally fine. Let's come into the ujjayii breath. And see if you can inhale and sense the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor. Like you're just saying hello. On the exhale, the front hemisphere of the pelvic floor. As you check in with that, the ujjayii breath wants to be consistent and kind, loving. And do one more breath cycle, please. And when you complete the exhale, walk your hands back towards your torso. And if this is one part of your compass facing north, I'm going to ask you to go not all the way, but part way towards your legs. So let's take the middle path between those two options. Of course, some may not come down as far as I'm coming, and we don't even need to go past 45 degrees. So bring your breath and your awareness down to the pelvic floor. And see if the inhale might begin in the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor, and the ujjayii breath will rise up through the inner body, particularly expanding the back hemisphere of your body. And then the exhale, toning the front hemisphere of your pelvic floor and really sliding up like a zipper towards the solar plexus. You might find that the crown of your skull kind of naturally lengthens as when squeezing a tube of toothpaste. And the inhale returns you to the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor. And keep your mind there, even though the breath is moving and you have different sensations in your body. And then walk yourself back up to sitting. Now keeping the left hip grounded, rotate to face towards your right leg. So we kind of went in stages there. We're going to come around towards the right leg and again, walk forward, really any amount. And we don't need more than 45 degrees of the angle to come forward. And allow the mind to stay focused at the pelvic floor, which because we've turned the torso and not the pelvic floor actually has the same shape. In each of those three stages, it hasn't been distorted. The breath can have this kind of consistency, as can your mental focus. So even though the sensations are changing, even though the breath is moving, let's invite the mind to be very still. So your hamster wheel mind is just keenly attentive to inhale, back hemisphere of the pelvic floor, and exhale, front hemisphere. Now, from where you are, if you're further forward than 45 degrees, because we tend to sneak down, let's come up to that 45-degree mark. If you're not quite at 45, that's also okay. Take a block for your right hand, please, to the right side of your pose. Press down with your right hand and begin twisting your inner belly and your heart to the right. So now we're addressing Samana Vayu, which is the next Vayu up. Apana is the lowest. Samana is the next, and that one is associated with your digestion. Now exhale for the rotation to your right. And then exhale and rotate yourself back up to center. Bring your right leg in. And take your seat without any distraction, no detours on the way back home. Listen for even a glimpse of the quiet at the center of the 6 stations of the mind. Take the right leg in, take the left leg out. This exploration is a way of balancing the vayus by balancing the one that is frequently the most problematic. Let me say that for our yoga therapists who are in training too. The most problematic of the vayus in our society is prana vayu because it's going up and out all the time. And it's basically taking the other vayus with it. Like they're going on an adventure, which means people don't have really good digestion or elimination. And then there's issues with circulation and issues with vagal tone and issues with the mind and memory and concentration. So we're balancing prana vayu by balancing apana first, second and third, and then just touching into Samana Vayu. Okay, let's come forward. Again, we want the ujjayii breath, and you don't need to be further forward than about 45 degrees. And if that's past where you can go, of course, you stay within your own range. So using the ujjayii breath, invite your mind to be really present just at the pelvic floor, like you're taking refuge in the bones of the pelvic floor. The simplicity, it's also the root chakra, our foundation, our connection to the earth. When you exhale, you might notice a gentle tone on the pelvic floor. You could emphasize the front hemisphere of the pelvic floor. When you inhale, a gentle expansion on the pelvic floor. And you could emphasize the back hemisphere of the pelvic floor. And keeping the mind at your pelvic floor. Let's inhale, glide up to sit and make a rotation just at the halfway point here. And the pelvic floor didn't change. The pelvis and the legs remain the same. We only moved the torso. You don't need to move the mind in moving the torso. So stay with the ujjayii and this just very simple and intimate connection at the root. And inhale, rise up to center and make the final rotation, like at halfway more to go. And over your left leg. It's helpful to have a block. Put it on the outside of your left leg to be ready. To allow the mind not to wander around, but to be keenly interested in the pelvic floor and the breath. If there's any place of tension in your body that's not necessary right now, like tension is different than tone, or if there's tension in your effort, consider subtracting that tension and just staying with the elegance of your effort. And place your left hand on the block to the outside of your left leg. And as you exhale, twist your inner belly and your heart to your left. You might cross your right hand over your left ankle if you enjoy that extra reach. With your exhale, rise back up to your seat without any detours, mental detours along the way. Come into your seat. If we are not able to digest our moods, our emotions, our life events, if we can't digest our thoughts, if we can't digest our food, it's hard to move on from where we are in life. If we don't have healthy elimination, also very difficult to keep moving forward in the journey of our evolution. Let's see if your mind might feel a little bit more grounded right now here in the present. I'm going to ask you now to come down to Shavasana. We don't need to go to the other values. We've already addressed them in all of the flexion and extension. But I'd like you to know this piece of information. As you wring out the tension in the body, as we return to Samana and Apana Vayu, sometimes you're going to discover that you're actually deeply tired, that your adrenals they've been working overtime while your digestion of life events and emotions and thoughts and moods is not actually happening in an effective way. Your adrenals are back there working overtime to keep you going based on past impressions. which generated your sense of self and other, which generated the pendulum of likes and dislikes, and gave you a sense of what you're driving towards in this future that isn't even here yet. So if you feel really tired right now, if you've got that kind of like, whoa, I'm really drained or really fatigued because of life at large, it's not just yesterday or the day before. This is a really important Shavasana to come to. So please make yourself comfortable for Shavasana. Come down to a restful position. You can cover up with your blanket. You can even use your eye pillow. The 6 stations of the mind at any one time, they are reflecting these 3 aspects of mind. They are reflecting the vayus, they're reflecting our doshas, they're all intertwined. So please get very comfortable in Shavasana. If you're resting in Shavasana, just allow for a little bit more wakefulness. And then you can slightly wiggle your fingers and your toes. Bend one knee at a time. Please roll to your side. And use both hands to come up to sitting. When you come up to your seat, I get to imagine that you're in the center of that sphere, and around you, the 6 stations of the mind have become more spacious. They've given you some space. And from the place you reside in now, if you might have the confidence that you could learn from your past without resisting it or preferring it had been different. Might you sense an openness to the unknown of the future without feeling disquieted or apprehensive? And could you imagine having just a sense of clarity and personal boundaries? And a right-sized relationship to desire in the form of motivation or commitment. Perhaps a sense of self-leadership or self-actualization, self-awareness, even self-advocacy. And could you sense the beneficial others in your life? Role models, companions, trusted advisors. And then once more, center yourself in the most essential you. And please raise your hands to your heart. Thank you very much for sharing your practice in all the ways that you do. Namaste. And of course, if you're following this practice on YouTube, it is really helpful if you subscribe to the channel and push like for any videos that are meaningful to you, because it gives me information about how to keep creating practices for you as well as for the community that gathers here together. Thank you. Now, if these practices are helpful to you, of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel, click like for the videos that help you, so I'll get that feedback, and leave comments or questions down below as well. Thank you once again.